Hello, my name is Jacob, and I am a Norse Pagan, and welcome to episode 3 of Paganism on the Go. I'm in Landshut, Germany, which is a small little city to the north of Munich, and I'm here to see Trausnitz Castle, which I guess it's technically a borg. There's two different types here. There's a Schloss and a borg. One's more of a palace, one's more of a fortification for defense. But regardless, I am here to just kind of see it, really. But of course, I wanted to take you with me, which is why this series exists in the first place, to both show you Germany as I'm exploring it as well, but also to share with you pagan subjects along the way. And today, we're going to be talking about the history of Germanic paganism. Now, this will be a brief history and not an in-depth one, but regardless, this is something I needed to look up as part of my own personal research into, Germany, into the faith, to really understand the land I'm walking on now. So I'll be covering a brief history of Germanic paganism, as well as answering some of your community questions submitted on the last episode of Paganism on the Go. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin today's adventure on Paganism on the Go, showing you Trausnitz Castle. I think I just realized why they built castles on top of hills. Because if you walk up the hill trying to attack the castle, you'll be out of breath by the time you got up there. So you know what? I get it now, castles. I get it. Castle Trausnitz was built in 1204 by... You know what? No. Not yet. You're gonna have to wait. That's a lot of stairs. Alright, the history for real this time. Trausnitz Castle was founded in 1204 by Duke Ludwig I. It took about 20 years to finish, and afterwards it was used as the main hub for all dukes and duchesses at that time. And it remained that way all the way up through the 1500s. And it also became a cultural center of Bavaria and this area. It was used as a place to house royalty and guests all the way up through the 18th century, but then it was converted into a barracks and a prison. It remained this way until the 19th century, when it was converted back into a political residence by the last king of Bavaria, Ludwig II. Now, it has been refurnished and added onto many times, but as you can see, many of the walls are actually original, and it has not sustained a lot of damage even all the way through World War II. The only damage it has sustained was there was a fire at some point in the 20th century that actually destroyed most of the inside, including the king's main chambers. And so a lot of what you can see in the inside, which I'm not even sure if I can film in there yet, is new, but it is still made according to the style of the time. But the fact that many of the fortifications still remain to the original way they were constructed, I mean, you can still see some of the original turrets, the walls, the multiple stages, and of course they are doing plenty of restoration work, as you can see behind me. What I think is really special about this site is the fact that it is over 800 years old, which again, to an American like me, is really fascinating. But the fact that it was built as a place to be fortified and defended, the fact that it hasn't sustained a lot of damage besides the fire on the inside, and you can still see what it's really looked like 800 years ago, is really fascinating to me. Now, once again, as a history nerd, the thing I like is how this place was built fortification-wise. So the only real entrance up is that little pathway you're seeing right there. And it kind of winds all the way down that hill, and it's very steep on all sides. And of course, there is a wall all around the peripheral. And there's several places where, of course, very strategic locations where you could place, fortifications like archers or any other form of ranged weaponry to protect. So, again, this is really fascinating, but it's still not that removed from pre-Christian Germanic times. So the way they fortified this place was probably very similar to the way that places in Germany were fortified as well, using the natural landscape to the advantage. Like I said, I was very tired after climbing all the way up here, considering the fact that we started way down there. So this place would have been very fortified, and it had to have been because it did protect the royalty of the time. Now, for today's pagan topic, we're going to be exploring a brief history of Germanic paganism, or at least paganism within Germany. Now, I say that because it's not just Germanic paganism. There's actually a lot of influences onto the gods and to how the history of religion really evolved here. It all begins back in the Iron Age in around 1200 BCE, when both the Celtic, Germanic, and the Slavic people were all inhabiting the area we know as Germany today. Where we get most of our information about the Germanic people, or at least the people living here, comes from Rome. And they didn't actually start invading or conquesting here until around the 1st century BCE. And so we really don't know that much information about the Iron Age. We just know that the Celtic, Germanic, and Slavic people all lived here at the same time, sometimes intermingling, sometimes having their own unique practices. It seems like the Celtic beliefs were different than the Germanic beliefs and the Slavic beliefs, but yet they all seem to have similar roots. Once again, most of our information comes from Rome, and they didn't come into play until about 112 BCE. And their intentions weren't exactly great. They really just wanted to spread Rome. Rome had a very, egotistical mindset, as they wanted to spread the Roman Empire because they were the best to just about anyone. Now, the benefit of Rome, at least compared to the Christian counterpart of later years, is that when it came to religion, they cared more about reframing the religions that already existed. And so they would allow people to still have their customs, can still have their practices, their deities. They would just be reframed to a Roman mindset. I even have a quote from Julius Caesar from his book, The Gallic Wars, where he talks about the Germanic people and the gods that they follow. But of course, in his own Roman arrogance, he doesn't call them by the name of their gods. He gives them to the Roman equivalent, because that's what they did. You're worshiping Balder, so, you're just worshiping Apollo. And so that's the framework they would use. So here's the quote from Julius Caesar's The Gallic Wars. Within Germany, among the gods, Mercury has the most important cult. His sacred images are fairly frequent. The Gauls call him the inventor of art and skill, the guide on roadways and journeys, and they believe he is the greatest power over trade and pursuit of profit. After him, they venerate Apollo, Mars, Jupiter, and Minerva. So once again, they reframe the religion while not rewriting it. Now, eventually this would cause problems, as the Christian religion eventually did overtake Rome. And so that's where we see this kind of shift. So Rome converts in about the 4th century CE, and as soon as this conversion happens is when they start trying to conquest in a different way in Germany, where they start trying to convert the populace to the new Catholic religion that is emerging from Rome. And so the difference between reframing and completely converting is that instead of just saying, oh, you can keep your traditions, we're just going to rename them, they're going to completely abolish the old ways. Now, certain things they would rename and just make into saints, as we'll see later on, but within the 4th century and beyond, the conversion tactics into Christianity became very aggressive. By 596, the majority of the populace within Germany at that time were converted to Christianity. Now, there were quite a few holdouts, most notably Saxony, that actually was the main target of Charlemagne. Charlemagne was the final nail in the coffin for most paganism here in Germany, as he was the one that removed Irminsul within Saxony in 804. And this seems to be the most commonly marked date where paganism officially ended within the German region, as most of the populace had been converted or at least sent into some form of secrecy. When I was doing my history into Norse paganism, the date for official conversion, or at least the last date given, was about 1064, when the last king converted to Christianity. And it seems like when the last kingdom falls, when the last group falls, or when the last king or ruler eventually converts to Christianity is typically the date given to when the populace converts, because most people end up following the ruler. This doesn't mean that people didn't go underground and have their own traditions. And we see this moving forward, that many people still had their old ways, their old traditions, even when Catholicism came in. Of course, when you're just a small farmer or a small village and a large opposing force comes in and tells you to convert, you're going to do it to save your lives of yourself and within your family. And once they leave, you're probably still going to practice in secret, and maybe even being like, oh, we'll go to church, but they're also going to do their pagan thing as well, which still seems to be something that is prevalent here today. When talking to people in Germany and from Bavaria specifically, it seems like a lot of their traditions are still very pagan. It's just in a Catholic lens. This is, of course, something I want to explore in a later video, and I have a really exciting series planned where I'm going to talk about the Three Sisters of Bavaria, which is a very interesting story that kind of frameworks everything together, both as the pagan past of the Celtic, Slavic, and Germanic influences, all the way up through the Christian conversion and the Roman, reframing, and of course, what still exists today. So if that video sounds interesting to you, please make sure you're subscribed to this channel for when it does come out. Once again, this was just a brief description of the history of paganism within Germany and an introduction into how complicated it can get. I don't have all of my resources like I did in the United States. I don't have all of my history books, and I'm kind of limited by the internet, what I can find there. And when it comes to these very specific moments in history, it can be really hard to find the information I need. So that's why this was a brief introduction. Hopefully I can explore more about this, including the Three Sisters exploration that I am doing research on that I'm really excited to share with you because it has been really interesting information.
Have you been sleeping well? Have you still had some time for research and studying for the gods while exploring?
How I've been sleeping is an interesting question. I don't know why that's a curiosity. I assume it's probably with my flight here, or at least the jet lag. So that's how I'm going to answer that part of the question. So yes, it was difficult at first. I mean, the jet lag itself lasted for maybe a week, but as far as like the sleeping, I only slept an hour on the night flight here. And so by the time I actually got to Munich and got into my house and got into bed, it was like 8 o'clock and I just passed out at 8 o'clock at night. And so I've been sleeping like a baby, honestly. It took me a while to get used to the no air conditioning because I sleep in a very cold house. I think back in the States, I keep my house at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's very cold. And so here, you know, there's no real regulation of the temperature at night. So sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's hot. So that's probably the hardest thing to get used to. But I've been sleeping fairly well. Not looking forward to readjusting back to time in the United States. I feel like it's going to be more rough going back, you know, because I'll be wanting to go to bed so early. But I don't know, we'll see. But so far I've been sleeping pretty good. I'm just not looking forward to the transition back. Now, to answer the second part of this question, how has it been keeping up with my research and studies? As I've mentioned in this video before, it is difficult because I don't have my, extensive book collection. I have over 30 books on Norse mythology, Norse paganism, and history, and so I don't have those here. I just have the Poetic and Prose Edda because I feel like that's what I was going to need the most. So I have been using the libraries to my advantage for the most part as best I can to try to get more information. So right now I'm looking up places to go, but now I'm learning I need more history books when I was researching this video. And so that's probably been the biggest holdback into my research, but honestly, I think I've kind of needed this. The last bunch of videos I filmed in the United States, I feel like were very research heavy. While I'm always excited to share the facts, history, and information about this faith and, the history of it all, it's not exactly the most fun thing to me. I made this channel to share my journey, so I enjoy the actual journey part of it. So this has been great to reconnect with my own journey, with sharing my own journey. So it's that balance where I feel like I was too research heavy for a bit, so I'm excited to get back into the flow of things, back into just having experiences, but I am actually lacking in resources right now. So I think on the experience front, I'm enjoying it. I've definitely had a couple revelations out here, and mostly into researching into the history of Germanic paganism, the history of Rome, the history of the Celtic people that used to live here, the history of the unique history of Bavaria. So it has been really enjoyable, researching Germany, because I think when people think about Norse paganism, obviously they think of, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, Iceland. They don't necessarily think about Germany, but Germany really is the heart of it, the root of it. Is that some of the oldest forms of Germanic paganism come from here. I mean, you had the early Celts, you had the Slavs, you had the Germans, and then eventually transitioned north to Anglo-Saxon paganism, to Norse paganism. So this is a very root place for the old beliefs, and I'm starting to find some really interesting information. I almost get these Indiana Jones moments where I start researching down a rabbit hole and start finding all these threads that come together into some information. Now, taking that information and putting it into a video has proven difficult. So I feel like in this episode, I've definitely set the roots down as far as, what I want to look into with my time remaining here. But with, 2 episodes a week and only, I think, 6 weeks left here, I'm really beginning to run out of time. But this won't be my last time in Germany for sure. And I'm excited to take the information I learned now, take it back to the States, and continue to do that research and those deep dives. But I hope with the time I have remaining here, I can share with you some really amazing stories that I've been able to dig up here in Germany. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Paganism on the Go, where I gave you a brief history of paganism in Germany. If you want your questions on Germany answered in the next episode of Paganism on the Go, please put them down below, and I may very well answer them in the next episode. But otherwise, thank you so much, and until the hall, Skål.